Welcome to Milk Drunk by Bobbie, a straight-up conversation about parenthood without the BS. We'll be featuring parenting experts, people you may recognize, and some others you might be meeting for the first time. Milk Drunk is brought to you by Bobbie, the mom-founded and led organic formula brand evolving the conversation around how we choose to feed our babies. Our goal is to have open and honest conversations that make parents feel less alone. Think group chat energy, but with possibly more poop emojis. I'm your host, Angelica Temple, and today we're here to talk about gassy, fussy babies. First, we're joined by two incredible pediatric nurses and moms, Jennifer Walker and Laura Hunter, aka Moms on Call. They give us the scoop and their tips for helping gassy babies, from feeding positions to bottle choice, and how sleep can greatly benefit your little one's digestive health. After that, our very own Mallory Whitmore, aka The Formula Mom, will chat with Bobbie Chief Medical Director and Pediatric Gastroenterologist, Dr. Anthony Porto, who shares his insights on the topic of infant gas and how best to relieve it. Let's get into it. Today, we are going to explore a mysterious, threatening force that at some point every parent is forced to reckon with: a gassy baby. That's right, friends. Your cranky, fussy baby gets gas, and it can cause some serious suffering, not to mention what it does to our children. The first guests on this episode to dive into gassy baby territory with us are pediatric nurses, authors, public speakers, infant and toddler care consultants, moms, and entrepreneurs, Laura Hunter and Jennifer Walker, aka Moms on Call.
Yay!
Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
We're so
This is
excited.
what we talked about. Literally, we've talked about this for what, Laura, 28 years? Nonstop?
At least.
Day and night?
Nonstop.
Yeah, I don't know that two people have talked more about gassy babies than you and I have in our lifetime.
Ever.
So, yeah.
Ever.
Yeah, we have some really great news for everybody. There's some misinformation. There is some great hopeful information, and there are things that can be done. So a lot of it is perspective. So we look forward to diving in.
I'm very excited for this deep dive into gas. Before we get into that, we're so happy to have you on the show. I would love to hear more about what Moms on Call is about and a little bit about your work.
Well, we love that question, right? We love sharing the story of Moms on Call because it's our story, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have 8 children between us.
Woo!
Yes, 8 children between us. And we were
2 sets of twins.
Yeah, 2 sets.
Two sets?
We each have
a straight up
set.
conversation.
Yeah.
Incredible.
It is the most fun thing ever.
Oh.
And, we were both pediatric nurses at the same office, and we were taking calls at the office. Then we began taking calls after hours and on the weekends. And so we were kind of filling in that space and getting the opportunity to walk out all these things, because you think, oh, well, when you're calling that after hours number, right, it's just emergencies. That's it. But really, that's not the case. It really isn't. And so for Jennifer and I to be able to take those calls, and a lot of times those calls at 2:00 in the morning, right, were new parents who were so scared and so fearful.
In there.
And for us to be able to say, hold up, let's take a breath. Let's look at these things. Okay, is this going on? Is this going on? Oh, great news. Great news. We can make it through the night together. And so just being able to walk that out is what led us to creating what back then was just a folder that we printed off of our computer with very specific, basic, day-to-day information from gassy babies to feedings, whether you were breastfeeding or whether you were formula feeding or whether you were doing a little bit of everything, and a specific routine, right? How do you just kind of begin to walk out life when many of us were, moms or dads and trying to work a job and take care of kids and take care of the house and take care of the groceries and the toilet paper and the half bath and, all of those things that we have to juggle as parents. And so being able to kind of walk that out in a very simple way was just incredible. And we often say it was a byproduct. We didn't set out to create a sleep method. That's not what we did. We set out to be a voice of hope and encouragement and consistency.
And one of the first voices,
Oh,
of moms in the marketplace. Back then, it had only been doctors, and certainly dads, and their voice is valuable. But we were really one of the first resources that was written by moms. And so we had that perspective, and we made it short, succinct. We knew that you didn't have all day. You need this outline format.
Quick.
Like, here it is. I need to know in like a page and a half outline. I need to sum it up. And this is what I need to know like right now, because I feel like I'm in the middle of a crisis and I don't know what these noises mean. I don't know what these faces mean.
Oh my gosh.
They're drawing up their little legs. Do I need to be fixing this? And we just said like, hey, gassiness, constipation, coughing. Here's what it is. Here's what you do about it. And here's when you call the doctor. And it's just succinct and really helpful in the moment. And it was just so well received. And so, as busy moms, writing for busy moms and dads, it grew from there in an unimaginable way. So now we have partnered with families all over the globe. And our books are, we have a series of 3, 0 to 6 months, 6 to 15, and then the toddler book. We have the podcast, we have the Instagram, we're on Audible. It's just unbelievable how, when you can provide some simple information and ways forward, how beautifully that's been accepted. And we look forward to really sharing it with your listeners as well.
And one of the stories that I think was instrumental was I did a consult for Kenny Rogers and Wanda and his twins.
Okay.
And walked into the house, and Kenny and Wanda were so gracious and just ready to tackle the life in the world of twin parents, right? And I got ready to leave his house, and he was flipping through the folder that Jennifer and I created. And he says, whoa, wait, this isn't copyrighted. It'll be copyrighted tomorrow morning. And his attorneys from Nashville were calling the next morning because we didn't know.
Yeah.
And I kid you not, he said, Laura, you've got something here. Send this folder to a self-publishing company, throw up a website. It'll cost you a couple $1,000. And he says, you can't hit a bullseye if you don't throw a few darts. And so that's exactly what Jennifer and I did. We just got together and said, okay, how can we get this folder to as many families that need it?
Oh my gosh. When are you going to create a book specifically for me and my 4 and 6-year-old?
Right. Well, we get that.
We also have this really great thing, if you haven't plunged into it yet, is the Moms on Call Toddler by Design app. And it goes well beyond 4 years, but it goes over the 5 primary motivators of toddlers, why they're different, and how we can use the things that they're looking for in life to motivate them to do the things that we need them to do in everyday life. And it's called Toddler by Design. And the 5 motivators are what we call the SMART paradigm, which is social, movement, an engineer, rule follower, and touch. And you can probably think in your mind, even right now, kind of where your kids might fall.
Oh, yeah.
So we have a little quiz that you can take for them. And it just shows you kind of why they're so different, what they're looking for, and how to bring out the best and temper the worst in each one of those different kinds of,
we're gonna come back to that.
It also works for your partner too.
Right.
So just going back to you as moms. So I know you mentioned you have 8 kids. You both have twins. Laura, how many kids do you have? What are their ages? And because, of course, we're all about feeding and the journey of it all, I would love to hear about your feeding experiences.
Oh, I love that. I love sharing my story because I've done a little bit of everything, right? I have 5 children. They are currently 32. Let's see if we can get this right. 32, 24. The twins are 21, and little handsome is 20. And
That's
so
what we nicknamed them, but they're all handsome.
they're all okay. Jenna. Yeah, she's got to be correct. They're all very, very cute and handsome, but little handsome is
Well,
little
handsome, so special. Yeah.
So, Jim and I, we married and tried to get pregnant and couldn't and miscarried. And finally, we had Kayla, and then and 8 years later, we had Allison, and we thought, hey, look, we're done. We're good. We're done. This is great. Perfect American family, right?
Mhm.
The 2 kids, the dog, the cat. This is awesome.
Done.
And sounded right. And then got pregnant unexpectedly with what we thought was number 3. At 20 weeks, found out it was identical twin boys.
Wow.
My husband had a vasectomy, so this is a cautionary tale as well.
Oh, no. No, I can't hear this.
Oh, yeah.
You need to hear this.
10 months later, I was pregnant with little handsome. And
No.
we wouldn't do it any other way, right? Hindsight is like, oh my gosh,
Meant
this is
to
the
be.
best thing in the whole wide world. But it was definitely not what we had anticipated, right?
Wow.
And so, I nursed with Kayla and Allison. I nursed pretty much exclusively.
Mhm.
Then the twins were 31 weekers. So they were teeny little guys. And
Mhm.
I would try to nurse, and then I would give them a bottle, and then I would pump, and they had a little stint in the NICU. And I had 2 older children at home,
Yeah.
and I was working on call 90 hours a week. And,
Oof.
and so I think I lasted maybe about 6 or 8 weeks doing that with the twins, and ended up transitioning to all formula at that point. And then Lil Handsome was 6 weeks early. So, of course, he was grunting, and they took him to the NICU. And I can remember, and isn't that funny? 20 years ago, I can put myself back to that moment where I laid in that bed and thought, and tears flowing, because it comes from the inside, right? And the outside. But even on the inside, sometimes that's so much worse. And I thought, oh my gosh, there is no way I'm going to teach a puny little boy, because he was 6 weeks early, how to nurse with twin 18-month-old boys at home. I have got to lay something down, and the nursing is going to be it.
Yep.
And he went straight to formula from day one. And has been on, he was on formula the whole time, that whole first year. So, and he turned out just fine.
And he's really smart.
and
handsome, of course.
Man, he is so cute, And again, I think back and I look at it, that hindsight, right, is, it was all preparation for creating and walking all of this out with our families. I needed to know what that was like to do nursing only, or nursing and bottles, or formula only, because I never know what kind of home I'm going to go into, right? I need to be able to look at that sweet family, whoever is doing the feeding, and say, hey, the way we feed our kids is not near as important as the heart of the one who's doing the feeding. And mean it, and know that I could stand very confidently and firmly on that. So I've done a little bit of everything right in my own home as I walked out my reality, which is very different than somebody else's reality. But I had to walk those things out.
And Jennifer, tell me about your kids and your feeding experiences.
Well, I have 3 also handsome boys. And my first one, oh boy, he was a chunky one. You went to the nursery, you saw he was 9 pounds, 6 ounces, but literally he was a 9-pound head and a 6-ounce body. His cheeks were so big. When you went to the nursery, you were like, oh, cute, cute, cute. What, did that kid eat another kid? Like, what? Just so much bigger than all the other, in the face, than all the other babies. And just adorable. But I'll tell you, he had quite the appetite, and I breastfed him for about 6 weeks. And it was painful, and it was, really difficult. And there was a lactation consultant that worked at the pediatric office where I was working at that time, and we worked together. And finally, just somebody gave me permission to lay that down. It was consuming my experience.
Mm-hmm.
And here I had the chubbiest cheeked, cutest baby. You just could not bring him out in public. Everybody's like squeezing his cheeks. It just, you couldn't help it. And I was so wrapped up in trying to force this to work that I was not enjoying this experience. I was not relaxed. That didn't help the process at all. And when I got that permission, it totally transformed my experience. I enjoyed everything so much better. Then 3 years later, I had the twins. And, you think you have, like, by the time your kid's like 2 or 3, you're like, oh yeah, I got this down. This is good. And then
I'm a pro.
Right.
No, the second
Why
round.
would anybody have to raise their voice? This is great. And then
my gosh.
you get 2 other ones. So you learn really quickly about your own personal abilities and judgments. And so
That's very gently put. Very well done.
I remember going to the pediatrician's office. We worked for the pediatrician, Dr. Susan Harrell.
Right.
She's fantastic. And I'm asking her, like, Dr. Howell, I just wonder, like, if we need to test their hearing. And she was like, you just have 3 boys, honey. Life is just loud. I'm like, oh, yeah, it definitely is. So Hammy and Bryce came, and they were 4 pounds and some change apiece. So entirely different experience. They were so tiny. And then you have an older child that you take care of. And so I did 50-50 with them. They were real easy to breastfeed. And so I would breastfeed one and bottle feed the other. And then the next feeding, I'd switch them. And that lasted for about 6 months and worked out really beautifully. So so I got 50-50 with them. I mostly remembered one kid might have been breastfed for a whole day because they are identical. So I'm pretty sure. And I say that because one time when they were about 2, I was bathing them at night, and
another cautionary tale.
Who is like just white as the driven snow. It's all good. I put the sunscreen on him, and then I look at Bryce, and Bryce is literally red like a barbecued Cheeto. And I was like, no. So what I did was I put sunscreen on Hamilton twice. Bryce got not my finest parenting moment, but so different, just like Laura was talking about, different situations, different seasons, and all the options are available. And sometimes not only do you need permission, but you need support for every due season that your kids bring into your life. And, that's what we love to see. We love to say, feed your babies. Fed is best, and enjoy this really tender, beautiful time. What do we need to do to really enjoy that, free you up, and make this season with these kids that you have at this time really the best that we can make it for everyone, you included.
Our saying is your best is best. We completely agree. Fed is best here at Bobbie. And I know, of course, you are fans of Bobbie as we are fans of you.
Yes.
Why do Moms on Call recommend Bobbie?
Oh my gosh. Before it was ever released, you guys were able to allow us to kind of come on and just really talk and ask the questions. And the number one reason was the ingredients. It really was. We felt back to some of the basics, if that makes any sense, because, Jennifer and I have watched over the last, 20 plus years, these buzzwords around formula and coming out, and they're adding all this stuff to the formula. And we've watched as formulas were coming to the market and using some of those terms, and then looking at the ingredients and thinking, oh, wait, I'm not so sure that this specific ingredient is going to go well with that digestive system. And then watching that, so I would absolutely say the transparency with who we talk to prior to y'all ever even coming to the market. That transparency was huge. And then watching how you guys fight to make it normal, however you choose to feed. Great. You're nursing. Great. We're going to champion behind you just as much as we do our formula mamas and daddies and impacting us, because we don't take that lightly. We are pretty picky about who we partner with and who we get behind and who we get excited about. And we have definitely been excited about you guys.
Yeah, all the way down to the amino acid chains. Do you remember those conversations that we had?
Ooh.
Yes. So, I mean, we were very specific, but not only that, the European standards, and we had a number of clients. It was happening over and over again that were getting black market formula.
Yes.
And the danger of that, you knew you were taking a risk, but you, as a mom, like, you're having to make an impossible decision. So what Bobbie did was make an impossible decision possible.
Wait, can I embroider that onto a pillow? That's incredible.
Yes.
And I mean, but it made it easier for families, and it made it feel so much safer for Laura and I as we went. Now we get to watch.
Yes.
Yeah, we get to watch. I have Bobbie formula families all the time. One I can think of right now. I love how their poops are nice and regular. I love the consistency that you can just, as we've walked with these very specific details of these babies' lives, we really get to see a lot of the really great results of that.
I can remember having families who couldn't read the directions on the cans that they had gotten off the black market.
Oh, yeah.
And you're just like, wait a second. No, we can't do this,
Yeah. I know you get tons of questions on Gassy babies because it is so upsetting for parents and mysterious, honestly, when you see your little ones suffering so acutely. So first things first, how can parents identify that their baby is suffering from gas?
Well, I like to change a little bit of the perspective. So it looks as if it may be suffering, but actually, I want you to think about what you might have to do if you had to poop laying down. So you're going to make some faces. You might draw your legs up.
Move around.
You're in pain because you got the strain going, right? So what they're doing is all these muscle systems are new to them. And so, they're kind of like, their arms are waving around. They don't know quite where to put those at first. And they're also learning how to organize the muscles in their core. And so a lot of what we see that we label as gas pain is actually what they're doing to tense up those tummy muscles because they're so smart, and a cry and drawing up those legs. Those things are going to tense the right places in their stomach so that they can move the stool and the gas to a more comfortable place. So a lot of it is just learning how to operate this gastrointestinal system. We all know, we know what muscles we need to push and, how it all feels. So you'll notice oftentimes about 3/4 into the way of a feeding, that's when they start getting really wiggly. That's when we start saying, oh no, it's the gas. And one of the things that parents instinctively do is they interrupt the feeding multiple times to quote unquote burp the baby.
Yes.
Where really, it's the opposite of what we want to do. We want to go through 3/4 of the feeding, stop for a burp for less than 1 to 3 minutes, then go do that very last little bit of the feeding at the end. So we burp 3/4 of the way in and at the end. And the reason for that is because every time they initiate the suck, that's when the most air is taken in. Right. So if throughout the feeding that happens 4 times, then we're actually producing more gas. So we do want to recognize, first of all, we start that gastrointestinal system at the top. When we start that feeding, about 3/4 of the way through, the timing is such that peristalsis of the gastrointestinal system, the little waves that help move things along, that's reaching that spot where now they're going to start to feel it. They're going to start to tense those tummy muscles up to kind of move things along and draw their legs in, really normal. And then we have a great burping technique, which you can see online for free at momsoncall.com in the free videos. And we call it the waffle iron, and it's so effective. And you can see a couple of different methods to really get an effective burp. And then we do the last little bit of feeding and we'll burp again at the end, again, just for a few minutes. And if you'll do the method in this way, what you'll find is it's much more effective. Now, there are several other things that affect it. The bottle type affects it.
The nipples make a huge difference.
Oh.
And across the board, we have found old-fashioned, regular-shaped nipples to work the best almost in every single situation.
Wow.
So really, we want to make sure that we're trying to decrease the chances of those big air bubbles getting trapped. And by looking at those things, that will help. And feeding positions with a bottle. How often?
I was just going to ask. Yeah.
How often have we fed with the babies right here in a crook of our arm? They're laying almost flat, right? And that it's difficult to suck and swallow correctly when you're laying flat on your back. So lifting them up and feeding more in that upright position, putting their neck right in between your middle finger and thumb, and you can support your hand, your arm on the arm of your chair and sit back. But feeding them sitting more upright makes all the difference. And you can also put a little bit of counter pressure under that jaw. That will also keep a nice organized sucking pattern, which will hands down decrease some of those gas symptoms.
And the amount of time that the feeding takes. So the other thing that when we're using bottles,
a major question.
That are slow is that they're wasting so much energy just trying to get this feed. This feeding's taking 45 minutes, an hour. Now we've gone into bulk feeding, digest, rest, reset. We're kind of going over our time limit there and running over into the next thing. And so what we find is that if we kind of limit, but have on a routine, the amount of time that we're going to spend with the right bottle, that it really reduces a lot of the gas in that way as well. So the timing, and we have a list at Moms on Call, we're all about simplicity. So you can turn to one page and it'll say from this age to this age, about here, from this age to this age, 20 minutes, from this age to this age, we're probably now around 12 to 15.
Yeah. One thing that's come up that our listeners have asked about is infant massage. So what are your tips on that? Does it work? Share with me.
Oh, well, I feel more that the motion, so we'll see, we'll do a little bicycle motion of the legs. That just kind of helps. The repositioning definitely helps. But I'll tell you what helps more than infant massage.
Okay.
Infant sleep. So one of the things that Laura and I could shout from the rooftops is that when they're getting the appropriate amount of sleep at night, according to their age, that they digest better. Because when we get the bulk feeding, digest, rest, and reset, that rest is a really important element. And it's also important for us.
So the next question is, if you're formula feeding, when should you be considering an easy on tummies formula, a gentle formula? Oh, hey, we just launched one. When do you start to introduce something like that? At what point, in your baby's digestive journey?
So one of the things that we're going to look for to make sure that it's not a true milk protein allergy, right? Because that's a completely different topic of conversation. If there is blood in the stool, then that is an immediate reason why, hey, we've got to talk to the pediatrician. We got to start to go down that road and let's see what we need to do. Other than that, then we start to say, okay, they're extra fussy. They're not wanting to eat. We're struggling to get the ounces in them that we need to get in them. And they're not gaining weight as well. Maybe they're spitting up a little bit more than we're comfortable with. That's when we step back and say, okay, what are the things that we want to change first? And that's those things we talked about. Feeding positions, the nipples, making sure the latch is good, getting onto a routine so that we can know when that digestive system needs to kick in. We've done all of that, and we are still seeing significant fussiness with the feedings and crying after the feedings. And these kids are just miserable for more hours than they are not. That's when we want to step back and say, okay, well, it might not be a true milk protein allergy, but maybe there's a little bit of a sensitivity here in the way that they're breaking this down. That's when we would go to something like the new Bobbie formula that just released.
And there's never a wrong time.
No.
Because it is nutritionally complete.
Yes.
Right.
So if you have a question, it's not going to ruin anything. What we want to do is we want to give the digestive system at least 3 to 5 days. Any change that you make and formula, even to, something different in the same variety of formula, you want to give that gastrointestinal system 3 to 5 days to figure out how to digest those new amino acid chains. It might produce a little bit of gassiness and fussiness in the transition. So what we recommend is don't change. you don't want to have those knee-jerk reactions like, well, I did a feeding and this didn't seem to help. Really commit. Give it 3 to 5 days, and that's when you'll really see the benefit in that change. So, if you're going to do it, at least do it for a minimum of a week.
I would also say that if any of our listeners are in that position of we've tried everything. We've tried all the hat tricks. We've tried all the formula. And we are just a mess. That is the perfect opportunity to have somebody come alongside you and create a plan and then walk it out with you.
And I also love on that note that you need the support. And so you don't always have a tribe that speaks life into you. And so what we find is that if we can support the schedule keeper, if we can give those little, every morning when we get this schedule, it's like, okay, here's great. This is wonderful. You're doing a great job. And we'll say it 100 times over. That baby is strong, adaptable, and resilient. And so are you. And we're going to get through this. And those things are life-giving, as you have to wait 3 to 5 days through gassiness and fussiness when you make a change. So it's good to have the support that speaks good things into your heart.
Jennifer and Laura, this has been amazing. I learned so much, which I will now use to help my friends with gassy babies.
Yay.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise. Before we go, I would love for you to share again where people can find you.
So momsoncall.com is of course the best place to get all the information from. If you haven't been to our knowledge center, it really is incredible, from the blogs and the videos and the basics that are all we got so many free resources that you can doubt. So just make sure you go and check out the knowledge center at momsoncall.com. And of course, follow us on social. We're on Instagram and Facebook and Pinterest and all the fun places, right? So follow us there. We'd love to have you. And we have our podcast as well.
Yes.
So go and check out our podcast and check us out. We would love to walk that out with you guys.
And you'll find that all the resources have this flavor. They are all uplifting, encouraging, and life-giving. That no matter what decisions you're making, the best decision is the one you make.
Yes.
What an amazing interview. Thank you to Angelica and Moms on Call. I'm so excited to take it from here. My name is Mallory Whitmore, but you may know me online as The Formula Mom, and I'll be guest hosting this segment for Angelica. As an infant feeding tech, mother, and Bobbie's first ever education lead, I've been destigmatizing baby formula and pushing the industry forward for years. I'm so excited to continue the conversation on gassy babies with our guest expert today. Please welcome to the show Bobbie Lab's Chief Medical Director, Anthony Porto. Dr. Porto is a board-certified pediatrician, pediatric gastroenterologist, spokesperson for the American Academy of Pediatrics, co-author of The Pediatrician's Guide to Feeding Babies and Toddlers, associate professor of pediatrics, and associate chief of pediatric gastroenterology at Yale University. He's the medical director of pediatrics at Greenwich and Ambulatory Operations for Yale New Haven Children's Hospital, the medical director of the Yale Pediatric Celiac Program, and he's a dad. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Porto.
Thanks so much for having me, Mallory.
Absolutely. I would love to use our time together today to give listeners a little crash course on gassy babies. Hopefully that will give everyone some relief with a big scoop of formula know-how as well. Does that sound okay?
That sounds perfect.
Okay, great. So first question off the bat. How does a parent know if their baby has gas issues?
This can be, it's a hard question, right? Because as a parent, when you see your kid have gas, it just seems so painful, right? And we want to make sure that, how do we differentiate that? I always tell patients and their families, kids spend 9 months in utero, but they have like about 9 more months of development to happen as their whole lives. But really their digestive system needs that time on earth to be able to really deal with movement, right? And so for me, if kids are growing well and they're eating well and they're otherwise acting well after they pass gas, then that's likely fine. If you feel like it's interrupting their sleep or they're not able to really feed, then I think it's time to talk to a pediatrician and take that a little bit more seriously.
Right. And what are sort of the telltale signs of gas in infants versus just general infant fussiness?
Sure. So I think, the way that we look at children when they're passing gas, it looks really uncomfortable. And I remember when I was in training, my mentor said, imagine trying to go to the bathroom while lying down, right? Because we don't do that as an adult. And that really just makes us figure it out. So what kids are really trying to do, they're trying to expel gas. So they'll make faces, they'll be squirmy, they may cry. They also will maybe bear down. So basically their knees may come up to their chest. And those are all signs that they're just trying to get that gas out.
Okay, that's really helpful. And what causes gas for infants?
So gas is natural. Everyone produces gas. It can be due to bacteria in your colon that can cause that. But also it happens because we swallow extra air, right? Especially kids when they're feeding. This can happen during breastfeeding, during bottle feeding. It can happen when they cry or when they're sucking on a pacifier.
Okay. And this may be a myth-busty question. Is it true that gas can cause colic or colic can cause excess gas?
So that's a great question, because part of it is that we know kids with colic, they cry, right? And the crying causes the gas. So everyone who has gas doesn't have colic, but everyone who has colic probably has gas because of the excessive crying that is associated with colic.
Okay. And is that because as they cry, they're like gulping in more air?
Exactly right. So they're swallowing more air, and then that leads them to be extra gassy. So the gas is almost like a result of their colic, not a cause of it.
Okay, that makes sense. So what can parents do if their baby is uncomfortable with gas pains? Are there easy things they can try?
Sure. Now, I usually recommend that patients make sure that they're keeping the child elevated during feed so they can burp feed. So they can burp regularly. This can help get the gas out earlier before it goes through the digestive tract. And then if they are gassy, I could recommend certain exercises, some including abdominal massage. So starting in the bottom right of the belly and then working around, going up, across, and then down to the lower left. This is sort of mimicking how poop moves through your GI tract and actually helps to expel gas. The other thing I recommend is doing bicycle exercises. So putting your child on their back and then moving the foot legs back and forth, bending the knee up into the chest, back and forth. And this also can help. And sometimes tummy time, if your child's ready for tummy time, just putting the extra pressure on the tummy helps the gas come out.
That's great. And I appreciated the instructions. I feel like I've read about doing tummy massage for infants, but never really knew what that meant. So the idea that you're sort of tracing the intestinal tract with the massage makes so much sense. So helpful. What about dietary changes? Can that help?
Sure, I think it depends. So as in younger infants who are basically formula feeding or breastfeeding, parents who breastfeed typically try to eliminate food from the diet. However, the data there is very limited. There's not really concrete data that removing food from a mom's diet who's breastfeeding can actually help the child. What I usually tell families is that if you notice that you're gassy when you have certain foods, maybe those are the ones that you should remove. But I try to limit how much a breastfeeding mom eliminates from her diet because I really want to make sure she's getting all the adequate nutrition that she needs. As kids get a little bit older, when they're starting solids, that's when we can sort of see, oh, hey, I gave my child broccoli today and then they had symptoms. And that's sort of where you can have that correlation. But usually in younger kids, the diet is less of an issue.
And I do feel like it's always like broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, kale. I mean, even as an adult, those are like gassy foods.
Exactly right. And beans is probably another one I would add to that. But yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Okay. What about supplements? Can prebiotics or probiotics help with gas?
Great question. I mean, with a prebiotic, that is basically fiber. And that basically is going to help feed the probiotic to help restore good bacteria. And a probiotic is a bacteria that helps maintain gut health. Right. And so typically the data is really out there for colicky babies, where those kids who were on a probiotic, one of the common strains that we think about is Lactobacillus reuteri. And that bacteria had shown by parental report to decrease crying episodes. So my feeling is the data is there for that particular group of infants. But probiotics are safe. So if you wanted to try it, there would be very limited side effects to that, especially if you have a full-term otherwise healthy infant.
What about gas drops? Do these really work? And if so, are they something you recommend?
Sure. I'm laughing because when my second child was born, she was very gassy and also had a lot of reflux type symptoms. And I was the person in the middle of the night going to the local pharmacy in my sunglasses and buying all these things because I really wanted to do whatever I could to help, right? And, but the truth is, so right now, the one gas drops that you're talking about is simethicone, and simethicone is FDA approved for treatment of gas in infants. It's a safe medicine to try. It's not always effective. There's some data that shows it actually helps more as a prevention versus once gas has built up.
Oh, okay.
So talk to your pediatrician, but we usually recommend doing that up to 3 to 4 times per day. And it may have more beneficial effects to prevent the gas buildup, but not as much once the gas has been developed.
That is a great insider tip. I didn't know that. Does how you feed your baby, whether you're nursing or bottle feeding express milk or bottle feeding formula, does that impact how much gas they might have?
Not typically. So breastfed infants as well as formula fed infants typically have gas and at the same level of frequency. And it really probably more depends on how they're being fed from a position point of view.
Well, that's great because that is our next question. What kind of feeding position do you recommend?
So I think the first thing I would recommend is that kids stay elevated. So always have their head above their belly, right? Because this will help from a gravity point of view. And it also gives you a good position to burp them if they need to be burped. In addition, when you're feeding with a bottle, make sure that they have a good seal, right? So make sure they have a good seal in the nipple so they're not swallowing extra air. And this is also true for the breastfed infant. And also when you're feeding with a bottle, make sure that the tip of the nipple has formula in it because otherwise they're just sucking down some air.
And I feel like that's opposite. Normally you have that image of a baby nestled in the crook of your arm. They're kind of horizontal. So that's a good tip, keeping baby upright. Another tip that I've heard is that if you swirl formula instead of shaking it, that can help prevent gas. Is that true? And are there other practical things parents can do to help?
I like that because, what swirling will do is it will help mix the formula, like the powder formula, but also create less bubbles, right? And that's really where that can be helpful. So we know that powdered, when you're mixing the formula, they're waiting for their next feed, right? If you don't prepare the formula beforehand, this is something that you really want to make sure that bottle sits for a couple of minutes, but a couple of minutes may be more difficult when your child wants their next feed, right? So the other thing is sometimes there are certain bottles that kids can have that will get rid of some of the extra gas bubbles, which can be helpful. Making sure that, again, they have a good latch so that they're not swallowing extra air. Sometimes a slower flow nipple can be better, so they're not taking or gulping in as much formula and some air along with that. And those are some easy things that we could try. Sometimes some kids may want to try ready-to-feed formula if we feel like that's making a difference. And if it does, that might be helpful for certain infants as well.
So let's say a parent has tried all of these great tips that you have recommended. When can they expect that their baby might stop struggling with gas? Is it age-based or stage-based?
That's great. I think when I see patients in my office, newborns, 1 week old, 2 weeks old, no matter what you say, it seems like it's going to be forever, right? Because 4 months, 5 months sounds really far off. And so
it's a lifetime.
It is, right? And so I think typically we see things sort of peak at around 4 to 5 months of life in a full-term infant and then start to get better. So I usually tell families by 4 to 5 months, you should start noticing an improvement. But in some kids, gas can remain up until around a year. So it just depends on the child.
Okay. And if a parent has tried everything, their baby's a little older, they're still having gas, what do you suggest they do next?
Sure. I think I would definitely speak to your pediatrician, right? They'll figure out whether there is something else going on that we need to worry about, right? So is there something else that the gas is maybe came from something else? Is there a food intolerance? Is there an allergy that we need to address? I think there's other, we mentioned gas drops, but there are some pass gassing devices that are on the market that some parents really like. So talking them and navigating them through that would be helpful to see if you just have to wait a little bit longer or you need to try other things that may be helpful.
We're going to start talking about formula. So, one of my favorite subjects, how does formula impact a baby's digestive system? And is it different than breast milk?
Sure. So, we know that that formula has all of the right nutrients, vitamins, minerals, right? The macronutrients, fat, protein, and sugar that is needed to ensure adequate growth and development. It does not have all of the immunologic benefits that we know that's in breast milk. And and I don't think we're really trying to mimic that. We just really want to make sure our kids are growing well. As we always say, fed is best, right? And this is really so true. When my son was born, my mother-in-law said, now we have another person to worry about, right? And it's like that same thing, right? And I think all we do is like, what are we doing wrong for our child? And I think the most important thing is what formula is doing is nurturing and it's also nourishing your child, but it's also nourishing their GI tract and their digestive system to be able to grow and then accept solids and continue on after that in terms of development.
Okay, so let's say a parent has a gassy, fussy baby. Can switching their formula to a gentle formula like Bobbie's new organic gentle, can that help?
Sure. I mean, sometimes if a gassy baby comes to the office, we may recommend that they switch to a sensitive or a gentle formula. I think that we want to make sure when we look at a gentle formula is a partially broken down protein, right? So that's the protein source. The carbohydrate source can be lactose containing. But in some of the gentle formulas, they do use a lactose alternative. When I say a lactose alternative, lactose to me is the gold standard, given that that's what's in breast milk.
Yes, absolutely. And if a parent wants to switch formulas, what advice do you have for them to make that switch?
Sure. I think there's no right way, right? I think so. For the way I think about it, we learned a lot about this through the infant formula shortage as parents went from one to a different one and had really no choice but to sort of go cold turkey, right? And I think from my point of view, some kids do really well just going from one to another. Some there is a change. So you can do it more gradually where maybe it's 25% the new formula, 75% the old, then 50-50 over a few days until you're just on that new formula.
Okay, so parents have options depending what their situation is. That's good to know. You mentioned lactose as the gold standard carbohydrate in infant formula because we know that lactose is the carbohydrate in breast milk. And this feels like another myth-busting opportunity here. Can you talk about lactose intolerance in infants and whether that's something that could cause these gas or digestive symptoms?
Sure. It's a great topic because I do think there's so much confusion as well as misinformation. So lactose is a milk sugar. And so lactose is a double sugar that you need an enzyme lactase to break down. Right? And so most kids, I always tell families when I see them in the office, of everyone in this room, the one who's least likely to be lactose intolerant is the infant, right? We lose the enzyme as we get older. So I think from an adult point of view, we think about lactose intolerance because it is so common and more common in adulthood, but it is so rare in infants. So kids can tolerate the lactose carbohydrate in infant formula. The majority of kids, even premature kids who still have a developing gut. What is different is that we hear milk allergy. Milk allergy occurs in about 3% of kids. What a milk allergy is an allergy to the protein in milk. And so that is more common. So I often hear is my child is lactose intolerant, but what is really meant is that they're having a milk allergy. And that milk allergy usually is also short-lived, but it's very different because milk allergy is from a protein issue, right? An allergy to a protein where lactose intolerance is due to not being able to break down the carbohydrate. That being said, infants should rarely have that problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see the same misinformation even on the breastfeeding side, where a breastfeeding parent will say, well, my baby must be lactose intolerant because when I cut dairy out from my diet, now they're doing so much better, not realizing that the body still produces lactose. What they've removed is the cow milk protein. And so, yeah, it really is a pervasive myth. So we appreciate you coming on and setting the record straight with that. So what are some of the most common mistakes that parents make when it comes to formula feeding, and how can we avoid them?
Sure. I think the first one is switching formulas too quickly. I mean, I often see in my office where you have a 4-week-old come in and the kid may have been gassy or just maybe not pooping as was expected, and they're on like their 9th formula, and you say, wait a second, like we need to give it some more time before we know whether a child is responding well to that formula or not. And I think sometimes as parents, again, we want to do something different. We read the labels and we say, oh, that this is my child's gassy, this is the right formula for me, or I switch. And I think that is probably one thing I would say. When you're on a formula, stick with it for at least a week to 2 weeks so you can see what's going on before we start making judgments and switching, because then it's hard to really know whether your child needed a new formula or just got better on their own.
And that was my experience with our first. I was a compulsive formula switcher. And now I look back and I'm like, oh, her poor little gut. But yeah, when you're a parent and you're new and you just want your baby to feel better, compulsively switching is common. So that's a very good piece of advice.
What we're all doing is what we want best for our kid, right? And I think that's really the key thing.
Oh, absolutely. So we mentioned you're the chief medical director here at Bobbie Labs. Why do you recommend Bobbie?
So I think it goes back to, we know formula will have and provide adequate growth and nutrition. And what I like about Bobbie is that it is lactose containing, and it provides those who want an organic version of a formula that opportunity and that option, and also meets a lot of the European standards. And as someone who became interested in infant formula because of the concern of European formulas coming to the United States, I like to know that this is FDA registered, but also meets a lot of the quality concerns that people have or why they're choosing European formulas.
That makes a lot of sense. I didn't realize until I became a parent how many people import formula from Europe that's not regulated here in the US. It's shocking.
I know one of our first study that we did based in New York, it was about 25% of kids. So 20 to 25% of kids were who were formula fed were using formulas that were brought here illegally. And the biggest concern from that is a recall, right? You just don't know if there is a recall. We know, having lived one in the United States, lived through one, that we know that this is a possibility, and to be able to know that we can follow certain regulations on that is, I think, so key to parents and to professionals as well.
Yeah. And now Bobbie gives folks the quality that they're looking for in a European formula, but the safety of something domestically manufactured, which is just chef's kiss. Phenomenal. Well, Dr. Porto, thank you so much for being such an informative presence on this podcast, for really diving in with me on this enigmatic force that is infant gas, for letting us pick your brain telehealth style. Can you please tell our listeners where they can find you on the internet?
Sure. I'm my co-author of our book, Pediatrician's Guide for Babies and Toddlers. We have an Instagram at Pediatrician's Guide. So please follow us there and get more information about formula, as well as all parental things that come up during infancy and toddlerhood.
Awesome. And I can vouch. I am a follower of yours, and your account is so good. Such good information. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mallory.
Thank you so much to Laura and Jennifer of Moms on Call, Mallory the Formula Mom, and Dr. Anthony Porto for giving our listeners and their babies some much needed relief. Having a gassy baby is a force to be reckoned with, and I think we're all feeling better equipped to help our babies. Be sure to follow Bobbie on Instagram at Bobbie for all Milk Drunk updates, and sign up for the Milk Drunk newsletter at milk-drunk.com. If you or someone you know is Bobbie curious, head to hibobbie.com/gassybaby for 15% off your first organic formula order. Milk Drunk is powered by Bobbie, hosted by me, Angelica Temple, and produced by Beth Rowe, Mary Kelly, and the team at Full Picture Productions. If you're liking what we're shaking here at Milk Drunk Pod, be sure to subscribe. You don't want to miss a thing. Also, if you have topics you want to hear discussed or have a hot parenting take, our DMs are always open.